Alright, YouTube, Julian Assange has once again shown he's the only sane man currently in the UK other than Nigel Farage. He attacked Clinton yet again, but at the same time he reserves his praise for Trump to the low simmering level. And in doing so, it's smarter than many people would think. Trump has been cast by some of his more virulent fans. Not even necessarily always all right. Some of them are pure Republican establishment. They just happen to rally behind him because he was winning. They cast him as a sort of god man, expect him to accomplish everything that he said seamlessly, and completely and utterly overhaul the entire United States. I'm here to tell you that that will not happen. I was a soft supporter of Trump for the last few months of the election, after abandoning fake libertarian Johnson, who was all doped out. At some point, he was no longer really aware of what was going on in the race. I think, it was sad to see because he could have been a better candidate. He with the Bill Weld stuff, I think he got corrupted a little bit by somebody who was still kind of a Republican. He almost turned into a half-assed Ron Paul. Only Ron Paul if he was perhaps more stoned more of the time or something along those lines. Still a decent person, still a good human being generally speaking, but kind of self-righteous and pompous and a little bit of an ass as well, giving some of the interviews that he did, especially the one where he pretended that he was mentally handicapped temporarily to show that he could get up on stage and talk like that, and people would still vote for him, which is a complete, it's bullshit artist move on Gary Johnson's part. Clinton was worse. Clinton was clearly worse. If there had been a third-party option that was viable and sensible, I would have voted for them. No such option was given to me. Under the circumstances, it only made sense to vote for Donald Trump. Clinton is literally the figure of everything establishment. Well, look at D.C. Look at this nation. It's not working. Obama comes out and says, "Oh, I could have beaten Trump." No, you couldn't. No, you couldn't, because it was the Rust Belt that flipped the election. Fucking moron. And the Rust Belt didn't recover. Your recovery affected the coasts. Yeah, it solidified the blue hold over the West Coast, over Washington State, Oregon, and California, and kind of Nevada to an extent. Vegas is doing fine, I suppose. And it solidified your hold over places like, most of New England, not some of the rural outlands. You see what happened to the results in New Hampshire or Maine. They were a lot closer this time around. Or even like western Massachusetts, honestly, or New York, New Jersey, places like that, were comfortably blue, or Illinois. Everything else started turning red. All of those marginal states, including states that you won by 10 points, and they would have abandoned you too because it was partially a referendum on your economic policies. But the fact that the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment have driven our nation into the ground doesn't mean that Trump is not a rich, moneyed, donor class individual. He is. He's not part of the political establishment in the sense that he and many of the people he's surrounding himself with have been in D.C. for a long time. He's a New York magnate. He hasn't really operated in D.C. before. That being said, though, the fact that he's not part of the political establishment itself doesn't mean he hasn't rubbed elbows with them for a long time now. This just helped him more, because he was able to self-finance his campaign partially. He's aware of the goings-on in D.C. Anyone who thinks that he's ignorant, that he doesn't know anything about diplomacy or trade or economics, you're fooling yourself. He's been hanging around with politicians since the 1970s. He knows full well the ins and outs of D.C. He rubs elbows with these people. He shows up at their parties. He talks with all the celebrities as intermediaries too. He's been an A-lister for a very, very long time. That does give him some semblance of understanding about these sorts of issues. The fact that he himself has not held office means nothing. It just means that he hasn't attempted to run before in any serious manner. But he's not perfect. He's still going to be just, and I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek, just the President of the United States. He's not the legislature. He's not the judicial branch, although he'll have a significant impact on the Supreme Court as well as federal judges. He's actually going to get the opportunity to load a hell of a lot of benches with their judges. A lot of these people have died or retired. These seats are open now. He gets to put who he wants there. And I imagine it's going to be a patchwork of individuals who will be mostly center-right. I don't think that he's going to put a bunch of evangelocons on federal positions in the judiciary all across the country. People who are far left who are worried about that don't understand who Donald Trump is. He's a lifelong Democrat. The fact that he switched sides was partially a strategic move because the Democrats were the establishment party. He knew full well, probably years ago, the kind of tack he was going to use in his campaigning. And I hope, I can't claim to know, but I hope that the fact that he hasn't held office before is evidence that through his mingling with the political establishment, he actually became aware of how retarded they were. He understands how ineffective many of their policies have been. He understands that the legislature is basically a college fraternity, that the judiciary is basically a bunch of old bumbling people who sit around and make bad decisions, and that the executive branch has been filled by people with the charisma of a wet dish rag. I hope that he noticed that, and that some semblance of patriotism slumbering inside him compelled him to run, and or maybe spite at some of these people. Maybe somebody finally tipped him over the edge by pissing in his cornflakes one too many times from D.C. Maybe it's the fact that he's been under audit so many times. He feels targeted by Uncle Sam, so now he's getting some revenge. I don't care, really, what the reason is behind why he ran, why he, won. He's the next president of the United States. He should fundamentally overhaul as much as possible. Most of the things that we do in this country are the exact opposite of common sense. Our tax plan makes no sense. Our trade deals make no sense. Our foreign policy makes no sense. The moral laws that we enforce make no sense. We sit here and we look at violent crime in some of these cities. It's so prevalent. We ignore that. We're more focused on somebody who's smoking a joint. It's never made sense. It's never made the country more prosperous. It's never made it safer. I hope he has the common sense to fix some of these problems, but expecting it to be some silver bullet for all corruption, my goodness, you're living under delusion if you think that he's going to be able to accomplish literally everything he's pledging to. Even if he works nonstop for 4 years with the kind of schedule he apparently can keep up, he'll only get maybe half of it done. That would make him, by the way, a very good president. He'd be rising up to near great levels after only the first term if he only does half of what he's expecting to accomplish. Especially if he leaves alone some of the issues that actually, from an objective standpoint or a more objective standpoint, aren't as important. What he needs to do is focus on, there hasn't really been a recovery outside of the coastal industrialized parts of the country. That's number one. Number two, violent crime is high. There are ways to fix this that don't involve more laws, more militarized police, more legalism. There's a lot of social alienation in the country. Hopefully he understands this enough to realize that if he starts stacking the benches and filling his cabinet with just people who are far right, it's going to alienate people on the left. You haven't solved the social alienation problem. You've simply shifted it from people on the right to people on the left, so again, so-called on both sides. And it hasn't fixed anything. Hopefully, though, foreign diplomacy is what he needs to focus on first and foremost. Obama has managed to piss off the Philippines, the rising powers that be within the UK, the Russians, obviously, Israel now, and a host of other countries. Obama, in his first term, healed a lot of those relations because he wasn't Bush. He didn't do anything of his own accord to fix our relationships with other countries. He simply seemed like less of a warmonger. 8 years on, though, it became clear he was just like before. He pissed off Merkel, too. Merkel, of all people, who you'd think would be his bosom buddy. They'd be like having dwarf orgies together or something, by spying on her directly through the NSA. People don't even talk about that anymore. He tapped the phone of the German leader. How self-explanatory can it be about why these various countries wouldn't want to work with us so closely? Obama looks at Turkey. Well, why are they leaning towards the Russians, especially after this ambassadorship? It's because you're worse. You are worse. Obama wouldn't have won. Julian Assange is right, though. Clinton was just a roaring terror. Clinton would have been terrible for this nation. We would have had 4 more years of most of the country doesn't recover, only the coast do. Well, that's fine if you're in one of these urban blue cores of the United States. Outside of that, nobody voted for Clinton. Nobody liked her. No, but why do you think that was? It's because their farms are dying, their mines are dying, their coal seams are dying, their textile mills are dying. Every little bit of industry and productivity in many of these states is dying. The Democrats self-righteously point at some graph showing, oh, look, the red states take more welfare. Why do you think they're taking more welfare? Their jobs have been decimated. A lot of people in those places are unemployed. It's not their fault. They try to cast it as, oh, these hick rubes out there in the hinterlands, out in the cornfields or something. They don't know how to run an economy. They need handouts. It has nothing to do with that. Those are the most productive parts of this country. The urban cores, do they grow anything? No. Are they mining? No. Are they fracking around New York City? No. They produce nothing. They take goods from the other states that have been produced, that have been pulled out of the ground in some form or another, and they process them, and then they ship them around because they have shipping yards. That's why they're doing well. Because it doesn't matter if productivity slags off in other parts of the country, they've still got something to import and export. A lot of consumers, big commercial skyscrapers, people pay $10,000 a month to sit in their penthouse or something like that. Yeah, that's fine. But that recovery didn't trickle down to other parts of the nation. If Trump realizes this, I think he does, focuses on that issue, then he'll go down as at least an average president. If he goes a little further, he gets to the good president or even very good president mark after just 4 years. It is a change. Assange has mentioned this too, but that doesn't mean he's perfect. Don't expect him to be the next Thomas Jefferson. Don't expect him to be the next Teddy Roosevelt. Your hopes of what he will achieve are way up here. What he's likely to achieve is somewhere here. It's good. It's better than Obama. It's better than W. It's better than Bubba Bill. It's certainly better than like Herbert Walker Bush or somebody like that. It's going to be good compared to what we've been through for the last 4 cycles. But it's not going to be perfect. Clinton would have been worse. Yes. But it doesn't make any sense to make the comparison. You're comparing a turd to a half-assed hamburger or something. It's been a long time in this country since we've had a great president. You have to go back to the Ike and JFK era to find an above-average president. You have to go back a century to find a great president. We haven't had any recently. People will rant about, the right will rant about Reagan. He wasn't a great president. He was a decent president. The last decent one, by the way, that we've had in this country. The left talks about FDR. Oh, FDR this, FDR that, FDR, #1 president of all time. No, he was a below-average president. He ushered in most of the problems you yourself identify. The Republicans should be the ones lauding FDR because he started the military-industrial complex. You're too fucking retarded to even notice that fact. So when I look at Trump, I say, I do have high hopes for him, compared to what I had for Obama or Bush especially. But some people, their hopes are way, way through the roof. You're asking too much of him. He's one person in politics. Is he competent? Yes. He's a competent individual. You can argue all day over whether W or Obama have been competent individuals in the past. I think the jury may be out on their mental capabilities at times, certainly. Ultimately, though, Trump is not the silver bullet for all of your woes. He's not going to send gold rushing down your street. It would be nice if that could happen, but he's just the president. He has to have the consent of the legislature to do most of what he's been talking about. True, the Republicans control the House and Senate. That's fine. What kind of Republicans control the House and the Senate? A bunch of evangelicals and neoconservatives, largely. What kind of Democrats are in the House and Senate that he could turn to swing a vote if he needed a few extras? Neoliberals, mainly, and social justice warriors. He's not going to get the far left or far right on board with his policies, which means he has to deal with neocons and neoliberals to get these things passed. As far as the judiciary goes, it's a little bit different. He gets to choose many of these judges, which means hopefully we're going to have at least 4 years of pro-Second Amendment, pro every other amendment. You know, we can't just fight for one part of the Constitution. We need to fight for them all. Unfortunately, if he decides to tie himself in with the evangelocons, There's the possibility of attacks on religious freedom in this country in favor of, state Christianity or something. I don't think so, though. I'm telling you now, I don't believe Trump is particularly religious. He'd rather work with the business Republicans, I think, than the Bible thumpers, which is good. It could alienate some of the flyover states. Utah may very well be a swing state by the next election, depending on what he does. Meanwhile, though, he's going to gobble up probably more of the Rust Belt. It wouldn't matter, but it would certainly be a continuation of the paradigm shift we've already seen. It'll be interesting to see what he does during his presidency. But like I said before, we can't prejudge him too much. We can judge the cabinet picks that he's making. We can judge what he's saying, on Twitter or something. But we can't do much beyond that until the 20th, when he actually is in office. When anybody blaming Trump for anything that happens right now is fooling themselves. Obama is still the president of the United States until the 20th of January, when Trump is inaugurated, when he's sworn in. The Electoral College has made him the president-elect, officially speaking, but he hasn't taken office yet. In fact, he's never held a political office in his life and won't until January. So I can kind of give him a pass on some things that he says that he wants to do that I may or may not agree with and so forth. At the same time, though, don't think of him as some sort of messianic figure. People thought that about Bush after 9/11. Look what happened. People thought that about Obama because he said, oh, yeah, we need change. We need real hope. We need an end to all the surveillance and wars. Did he do any of that? No. No, he got us involved in more conflicts. So many proxy wars across the Middle East that we almost wish Bush had stayed in office at times. He'll do, I think, a good job. But expecting the moon on a stick is a little bit too much of anybody, and Assange is right to identify the fact that he's outside of the traditional establishment does not mean that he hasn't rubbed elbows with it for decades and decades on end. Has he been corrupted by that? Who could say? We gotta wait to see actually what he does. He's not in office yet. When people also, on the other token, they say, oh, he's gonna be terrible. You don't know that. You know very little about him other than what you gobbled up in swill form from the media for the last year. Many claims of which are patently false if you look at his past. Many of which are absolutely, objectively false within any realm of human understanding. That's what people think Trump is all about. They think that he's some sort of cross-burning Nazi or something like that. He's not. He's a New York magnate. He's not from some cornfield in a Klan robe or anything like that. That's about all. Peace out.